Lovely stuff. Good to see you all here today. Hopefully you're a nice bunch. This is a nice, intimidating building, isn't it? But we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to do a little bit of a talk, tell you a bit about my life, my backstory, and then open it up to any questions if you have any. I'm kind of hoping you will have questions because honestly, I've tried to stretch it to an hour. The talking isn't doing it. So I'm going to need help padding it out a bit. Now, this talk is bloody long, so I couldn't remember it. So I am going to have to use my teleprompter thingy, so kind of, deal with it. So, I was a kid who didn't fit in. I was a misfit long before I even knew the word. I grew up just down the road in Eastleigh, here in South Hampshire. In primary school, I remember pressing my pencil so hard that it nearly tore the paper as I tried to write a simple sentence. Words and letters refused to stay straight. Reading a single paragraph felt like climbing a mountain. Meanwhile, the other kids seemed to sprint up this social mountain with ease. My chest would tighten every time I had to interact with someone I did not know. In the playground, I was the boy who tripped over my own feet and fumbled the football because of my dyspraxia. My face burned with embarrassment. I couldn't explain it then, but what everyone else saw as an easy task felt impossible to me. Each task an uphill battle. I would later learn I have autism, dyslexia, and dyspraxia. I was a student who forgot instructions the moment after hearing them, or who daydreamed out the window while the teachers lectured. On the surface, I looked like any other child, nothing visibly wrong with me. So the adults around me searched for other explanations. Some decided I was lazy, or not trying hard enough. Others thought I was just shy, or simply not that smart, as the rest. In truth, I was fighting with every ounce of effort just to stay afloat, but my struggles were invisible. I felt alone in a room full of people. A kid from another planet who couldn't decode this language that everyone else seemed to speak so naturally. By the time I reached secondary school, I had collected plenty of additional unofficial diagnoses from teachers and peers. Slow, daydreamer, disruptive. Nearly everyone underestimated me. I was placed in the bottom sets for almost every subject. The classes reserved for the hopeless cases. Every week, a teaching assistant would come and fetch me in front of my classmates, escorting me to a special remedial reading group. It was meant to help, but to me, it felt like a spotlight on everything wrong with me. I can still recall the laughter from a couple of kids as they left the room. The weight of shame and frustration pressing on my small shoulders. I would sit in that special group, burning with the belief that I was stupid. Self-doubt was crippling in my younger years. I watched my friends breeze through homework and exams while I stayed up late, scribbling and erasing. My rubber would turn to a nub. No matter how hard I worked, I fell short and felt stupid. Eventually, I started to believe those labels. That maybe I was just broken or dumb. Looking back, I now know that I'm autistic and dyslexic, with a dose of dyspraxia for good measure. But for much of my childhood, those words weren't part of my story. Instead, my challenges were treated as personal failings. A teacher didn't think I would get my GCSEs. One literally told it to my face. To them, I was a nice enough kid. I tried hard. But probably I wasn't going to amount to much academically. Hearing that hurt deeply. It also lit a small flame of defiance in me. A part of me whispered, I am capable of more than you think. At the time, it was hard to believe it fully, but the flicker of self-belief kept me going even when I felt completely misunderstood. I realize now that, like many people with dyslexia and autism, I was bright, but I needed to learn in a different way, a way no one around me knew how to provide. Back then, though, all I felt was that I didn't belong in the only world I knew, school. My breaking point came at the age of 16, during what should have been an exciting, formative year. Instead, my life unraveled. That year, my father walked out on our family without warning. In the aftermath, my mother fell into serious mental health crisis, a breakdown that left her unable to cope. And I became her primary caregiver overnight. Suddenly, my worries shifted from algebra homework to wondering if there'll be dinner on the table, or if Mum was safe when I came home from school. With my GCSE exams looming, I came frighteningly close to leaving education entirely to look after my mum. Each morning, I'd hesitate at the front door, torn between going to class and staying at home to make sure my mum was okay. I was afraid to leave the house because I felt I was the only person who could care for her. The school books and syllabi, already hard for me on a normal day, now felt utterly insignificant compared to the adult responsibilities thrust upon me. That period was the darkest chapter of my life. I'd lie awake at night in a tangled worry. The pressure of exams, the fear of what might happen if I wasn't there for my mum, the anger at my dad for leaving us. My anxiety, which had always hummed in the background, now roared in full focus. I often felt paralyzed by it too anxious to even leave the house at times. I didn't really have anyone I could talk to or who understood. We didn't exactly discuss mental health or learning differences much at school, so I soldiered on in silence, carrying a weight that felt impossible. I remember one evening, after helping Mum for a particularly bad day, I sat at my desk, staring at my revision notes. The words swam as they always did, but I had no fight left in me. I dropped my head in my hands and I sobbed quietly into my textbooks, feeling utterly defeated. I thought, this is it. I can't do this anymore. I was ready to give up on school, on everything I had once hoped for myself. And yet, somehow, I didn't give up. Looking back, I'm honestly not sure what exactly kept me going. Maybe it was sheer stubbornness, or a few kind people who stepped in at the right time. In Touch, a local charity for autistic young people, offered me some support during that time, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. They believed in me when I struggled to believe in myself. With a mixture of that support and desperation, I pushed through my GCSE exams. When results day came, against all odds, I had done well enough to continue. I remember holding that results paper in my trembling hands, tears of relief in my eyes. Apart from my mum, no one, including me, had ever thought I'd make it that far. But I did. I had survived the gauntlet. And that realization, it sparked something new in me. If I could survive, then maybe I could find out what thriving might look like. Surviving was one thing. I was tired of merely surviving. I wanted to actually enjoy learning and life, to find a new way of thriving. In Barton Peveril Sixth Form, I made a decision that would become a turning point. I signed up for a course in media and video production. It might seem odd, but holding a camera and crafting a story, images started to make me feel smart for the first time. In that video production class, I discovered I had a knack for visual storytelling and filmmaking. Give me a camera or an editing suite, and suddenly my brain came alive. I didn't need to slog through pages or text. I could express ideas through pictures, sound, and movement. It was like a door had opened that had been locked all my life. I remember pouring hours into a film project, completely in the zone, and thinking what it feels like to love learning. My dyslexia didn't disappear. Of course, I still had to write reports to accompany those projects that were tough. But now I had a context where my way of thinking was an asset. I wasn't fighting against the current of my brain anymore. I was moving with it. I was harnessing it. Around this time, I finally began to truly understand why my brain worked different. I researched what dyslexia and dyspraxia was from a scientific perspective, and eventually autism as well. Strangely, understanding the genetic element and the neuroscience was comforting. It was proof that I wasn't just stupid. My brain was wired differently, and there were reasons why I struggled with certain things. But more importantly, I learned that different wiring also meant different strengths. Bit by bit, I shifted my mindset from trying to fix to working with what I had. For instance, if reading was hard, I'd lean more on audiobooks and learning by doing. If my memory was shaky, I'd plaster my wall with post-it notes and set reminders for everything. I stopped focusing on what I couldn't do and focused myself to study in the way that everyone else, to not focus on the way that everyone else did, and started experimenting in my own way. That actually made sense to me. It was a slow trial and error, but it was liberating. My hard work and my new strategies paid off. Despite everything, I secured the grades to apply to university, something I thought was impossible. I admit, my first application to university fell flat. I didn't get in. The rejection letter stung, but it didn't have to be the end. Instead of giving up, I looked at it like a challenge. I spent the next year building up a portfolio of work through an art foundation course, pouring my heart into improving my skills. A year later, I reapplied to Bournemouth University Film and Media Programme. This time, got accepted. I can't describe the feeling of opening that acceptance letter. It was vindicating. The people who said I'd never make it to uni were proven wrong. But more importantly, I proved myself that I was capable of when I approached learning on my own terms. I went on, years later, in fact, I went on to earn a master's in applied neuroscience from King's College London. The same kid teachers thought would never pass his GCSEs, now studying the brain at one of the world's leading universities. University presented its own challenges, but it was also where I finally experienced what true support for a neurodivergent mind can look like. The support I received at university was completely invaluable. I met weekly with additional learning support tutors who would check in on how I was coping and how I was organising my studies. She'd go over my drafts, pointing out spelling errors and helping me untangle this jumbled grammar. The university provided me with assistive technology and even helped me secure a disability support grant for equipment. Suddenly, I had the tools, like speech-to-text software that transformed the way I could study. On top of that, I had a mentor in my department who understood media and understood that I learned different. With this two-tonged approach, I finally felt set up for success. It was like I had a team of allies working with my brain's natural rhythm instead of trying to force myself into a mold. The results? I thrived. I did not only pass my coursework, I excelled enough to graduate with a degree. I honestly don't know that without this help, I probably wouldn't have passed my classes. That experience taught me an important lesson. When people give someone with a difference the right support, that person can soar. I had spent so many years thinking I had to do it alone and had to overcome my brain. Now I understand I never needed to overcome it. I needed to work with it and let others work with it too. As I was finally finding my footing in academics, something else profound was happening. I was finding my purpose. It started small. In university, I took a role as a student ambassador, which meant I talked to prospective students and mentored some younger peers. I even joined an outreach program that brought me into local schools to speak with kids who were at risk of disengaging from education. It was there I was, a once helpless student, now standing in front of teenagers and saying, hey, I've been where you are. I've struggled. I hated school at one point, but here I am at uni, and you can too. I could see the skepticism in their eyes at first, but then I noticed a few faces kind of light up with that flicker of hope. I realized that by sharing my story openly, the ugly parts, along with the triumphs, could help people. My pain and struggles could have a purpose beyond just my own life. I remember meeting a 14-year-old boy at one of these school visits. He hung back after the session and he told me in a quiet voice, "Sir, I have dyslexia too. I didn't know someone like me could go to university or do anything big." That hit hard. I told him, "Your autism doesn't define how far you go. You might just learn in a different way. And that's okay." As I spoke those words to him, I think I was also speaking to young me, the me who desperately needed to hear that same encouragement years ago. That's when it clicked. I always had a sense that I would use my career to help others, and it made sense to draw upon my own experiences. The idea for a larger project, something beyond just informal mentoring, began to form in my mind while I was still at university. By the time I graduated, the idea had gained momentum. With a bit of seed funding and a whole lot of passion, I launched a small social action project that helped autistic students thrive by expressing themselves through media, just as I had. A few years later, I joined a startup called Exceptional Individuals, working alongside a small team of other neurodivergent people. Together, we supported neurodivergent individuals in the workplace, and we went on to launch the Neurodiversity Employment Academy, a program I led, designed, and coached and connected talented neurodivergent people with meaningful employment opportunities. I was still in my early 20s, barely figuring out my own career, but I knew exactly why this mattered. I didn't want others to go through what I went through. Or if they had, I wanted them to help clear some of those obstacles from their path. In building that program and running my social action project in the evenings and weekends, I found myself doing relentless hours for little or for no pay at the start. And yet I woke up every morning energized. This was my mission. Every time someone was able to express their own thoughts, or if they landed a job, or even just dared to dream bigger, it felt like a personal victory. I had turned a corner, from focusing on my own survival to focusing on how I could empower others to survive and to succeed. In the process of helping others, something in me healed as well. I stopped hiding or downplaying my dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. Instead, I started talking about them openly on stage, in meetings, online. It began to challenge the notion that these labels were purely disorders or deficits. After all, if I could turn my so-called weaknesses into the very drive for my career, were they really weaknesses? Over time, I came to see my neurodivergence not as a flaw, but as a feature. In fact, it's more than a feature. It's my unique advantage. In business terms, you might even call it my USP, my unique selling point. The irony isn't lost on me. The very thing that once held me back in school had become the foundation of my success and my identity. Let me explain what I mean. Dyslexia made reading hard, yeah. But it also trained me to think differently and problem solve creatively. Because I couldn't rely on rote memorization or linear thinking, I became a big picture thinker. I would often connect the dots that others might have missed and approach problems in innovative ways. Autism gave me intense focus on things I was passionate about and a drive for honesty and detail that can be a real strength in work and relationships. Dyspraxia? Well, I still can't dance, and I can't juggle to save my life. But it taught me persistence. Since everyday tasks, they took me a few extra tries. All those differences had collectively fostered a resilience and a persistence in me. I learned how to adapt, how to laugh at myself, and how to keep going no matter how many times I failed. Those are skills that turned out to be invaluable in running projects and business. In a way, my brain's difference forced me to develop muscles in creativity and problem solving and perseverance that I may have never have developed otherwise. I came to realize that my perspective as a neurodivergent person is exactly what is needed in certain spaces. For example, a while back, I was consulting with this major media company. I was there to advise them on how to make the workplace more inclusive for neurodivergent people. In the meeting, as we were brainstorming solutions, I noticed I could see some clearly systemic issues that they were facing and how to address them in a way that others hadn't considered. That's a neurodivergent system thinking kicking in. There I was, in a position to facilitate change at a high level, using the same mind that once struggled to find the right classroom. The thought struck me. This is what turning a disorder into an ability looks like. My journey has taken me from struggling with broken systems to working to change those systems. To bring things to the present day, that small startup I joined has grown into something much bigger. Today, I serve as the head of community investment and sit on the senior leadership team. We support hundreds of neurodivergent job seekers in building their confidence and skills. We train the world's largest companies to recognize and truly to value neurodivergent talent. One strand supports the other, creating a sustainable cycle of change. It's not about charity or ticking diversity boxes. It's about showing companies that hiring someone on the autism spectrum or dyslexia isn't just the right thing to do. It can give them a competitive advantage if the person is in the right role. People with dyslexia dyspraxia, and autism and ADHD are often highly intelligent, but can slip up in typical interview scenarios. We can help those scenarios and help candidates shine. I've seen brilliant analysts who just needed interview questions in advance to avoid anxiety, or creative designers who flourished and allowed to work in a quiet space. Little systemic changes unlock huge potential. I also founded an initiative called Divergent Thinking that grew from that small social action project that helped autistic students. Our mission is to provide tools that empower people to embrace their own unique way of thinking. In essence, we're trying to spread a new mindset far and wide. We hold workshops, webinars. I even gave a TEDx talk, all within the aims of reframing how society views normal. In that TED talk, I flat out said, normal is a myth, a concept that restricts, marginalizes, and limits human potential. It's time to celebrate the full range of human neurodiversity, embracing those who think differently. I meant every word. I've lived every side of this. I was the marginalized kid. I became the advocate. And now I'm working with leaders and employers to re-examine what normal really means. And let me tell you, nothing is more thrilling than seeing that light go on in a manager's eyes when they realize that accommodating differences isn't a burden, but an opportunity. That change-maker fire that was lit has continued to burn so brightly. It's the fuel behind every talk I give, every program I design, every meeting with policymakers or business executives, a drive to create a world where people like me don't have to fight so hard to be understood and to contribute. Now, I'd love to end this story with, and I lived happily ever after. But real life doesn't work like that. It's not a fairy tale, and I want to be honest about that. The truth is, I'm a work in progress, and I always will be. Yeah, I've come incredibly far from that kid who hated school and thought so little of himself to a man who confidently stands on stage and leads organizations. But my neurodivergent traits are still very much with me every day. I still struggle with things many people take for granted. My processing speed is slow. My working memory is poor. I have to consistently avoid cognitive overload. I still mix up spelling or lose track of paperwork from time to time. My sense of direction is so legendarily bad, I often don't know where I am, even if I've been there before. I get so anxious about being late. I map out my journey down to the minute. Train times, walking routes, backup plans for my backup plans. Sometimes I even do dry runs a week before. So for one particular important meeting, I did all that. And I still managed to turn up an entire month early. Not only that, I went to the wrong building. I walked in, I rehearsed my intro, I gave my name, and was met with this kind silence. You absolutely don't belong here. That's the reality of being autistic and dyspraxic. You can do everything right and still end up spectacularly wrong. There I was, a supposed expert on neurodiversity, completely lost in the streets of London. I had to laugh at myself in the moment. But hey, at least I wasn't late. It was a humbling reminder I'll always be that dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic person, no matter how many coping strategies I use. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Those quirks and challenges are just the way I'm wired. I've learnt to accept I can't overcome my neurodivergence as if it's something to beat. Instead, I manage it, I dance with it, I continue to learn from it. Every hero's journey has its ongoing trials, and mine is no different. But I choose to see those trials now as part of growth, not as a sign of defeat. I've also learned I'm not alone. Far from it. There's a whole community of neurodivergent people out there, each with their own stories, each finding their own way. The world is slowly waking up to the value of our perspective. In a classroom, there are conversations about different learning styles. In the workplace, neurodiversity is becoming a recognized element of inclusion. We still have a long way to go, but I do have genuine hope. Sometimes I think about that young me, the boy who felt so broken and out of place. If I could travel back in time, I'd hug that kid and I'd tell him, "You're not broken, you are different. And one day that difference will become your strength, your pride, even your power." I don't think he would have believed me then. But here I stand today, living a life that boy would never have imagined for himself. My journey isn't a straight line, and it's certainly not a finished story, but it has taught me this. Our struggles can birth our greatest strengths, and the labels that once wounded us can become our armor and our sword. I started out a misfit, was misunderstood for years, nearly lost my way, but ultimately found meaning in the very journey. Now I get to spend my days helping others turn their disorders into differences and their differences into the source of their power and purpose. I'll leave you with this thought. If you've ever felt like a misfit, whether you're neurodivergent or just someone who's always been told you don't belong, remember that every hero story starts with an ordinary person who feels out of place. The struggles, the detours, the breakdowns, they can be overcome, and they can even become the very thing that fuels your rise. I'm still on the journey, but I can say with confidence, I no longer wish to be normal. In fact, I celebrate being different, and I urge you to do the same. Because in that difference lies not just who we are, but everything we have to offer to the world. The world needs what we have to offer. So here's to the misfits, the misunderstood, and the marvelously different. May we continue to write our own stories and light the way for those who come after us. Thank you.